It's official. GM Joe Schoen and head coach Brian Daboll are back for the 2025 season. Welcome back to the Everything New York Giants podcast with New York Giants fangirl. I'm your host, Adrianna, and the news is out. The news that we have all been so anxiously waiting for is out. And John Mara also spoke to the media today, so I'm going to give you some highlights, the recap of that press conference. In the meantime, drop your feelings below because I know that the fan base is split on this, but I do think that more of the fan base is pissed off than those of them who are happy about it. I am somewhere in the middle. I am not happy about it. Let me be clear. But what I will say is that I'm relieved. I'm feeling a mixed bag of emotions, if you will. I'm relieved that he kept both of them as opposed to firing only one, because I think that would have been way worse than keeping both. I expected this because I just for the last 48 hours have had this weird feeling based on everything that came out, the way that the game went against the Eagles yesterday. I just felt like Mara is keeping them both. So I wasn't surprised when I heard the news. And what I think is interesting is that so many fans are surprised. I think more it's because a lot of us fans were just like, this is what we think is right. And I think that it was the right move to fire them both, honestly. But I also am like, it is what it is. Okay. I just have accepted that it is what it is. Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen are here for at least one more year. I would say at the most they get 2 years, and it all depends on how this season goes from a lot of different ways. A lot of things are going to contribute to that. I also think if they ended up with the first overall pick and John Mara did not clean house, I would have been absolutely fuming and completely furious today, because I feel like if you have the first overall pick and you have the first pick in every single round, it is an amazing opportunity to bring in fresh new blood to completely transform the franchise. And I think that at this point, you could make the argument that if we had the first overall pick, who trusts Joe Schoen to pick the first overall pick and the first pick in the next 6 rounds after that? I think a lot of us feel like that would be a horrible move. So I do think that in my opinion would have been way worse than doing what they're doing right now. So it is what it is. Does it suck? Yes, but I think it sucks less because we have the third pick and not the first. So obviously that has been official. The Giants have the third overall pick. We moved down one spot from 4 to 3, which I think is awesome. I'm very relieved that we have that. And on top of that, our picks, this is awesome. So obviously round 1, we have the third pick overall. Round 2, we have the 34th pick, which is the second pick in round 2. And round 3, we have the 65th pick, which is the first pick in round 3. So even though it's not the first pick and it's not the first pick in every single round, this draft could be roster changing for the future of this Giants team if Joe Schoen gets it right, which if should have a bunch of asterisks around it, because obviously it's going to depend on how that goes. Now, we're going to talk about John Mara in a second, but I think that the biggest selling point for him, and probably for the fans who are excited that they're back, is that he had a good 2024 draft. And there's no denying that, okay? Like you can argue a lot of things about Joe Schoen. You cannot argue that he had a bad 2024 draft. You can argue that he missed the opportunity to get a good quarterback, which is fine. But Neighbors is a baller, you guys. He had well over 1,000 yards. He had 4 different quarterbacks, 4 of which are probably some of, if not the worst 4 quarterbacks in the NFL, honestly, if we're being honest, based on how this season went. So the fact that he was able to do that, the fact that Tyrone Tracy, another rookie, a 5th-round running back, was able to get over 1,000 yards is amazing. Neighbors also set the new New York Giants franchise record for the most receptions by a wide receiver in New York Giants history with 109. He has more than Steve Smith, who did it. He had 108 or 107. So Malik Neighbors, honestly, the guy is a freaking beast. And I am holding on to the fact that if there's a possibility that we can get Sanders or Ward, can you just imagine what Neighbors can do with one of those guys? Even Jameis Winston, like at least the guy pushes the ball down the field. If Neighbors had 1,100 plus yards this year, the guy is going to be an absolute freak show moving forward. So, we're going to start talking off season now, obviously. And I think there's probably not a lot for some fans to be excited about, but there are some building blocks on this roster. So let's talk about those real quickly, and then we'll talk about John Mara. So we've got Andrew Thomas, obviously. We've got Jermaine Illuminor, John Runyon, and then I'm curious what they're going to do about Greg Van Roten. I honestly think that he was okay at center and guard, and if you can keep him at a reasonable price, the more offensive line help we have, the better. Speaking of the offensive line, let's talk about Evan Neal and Joshua Zudu, two guys who the Giants have not done well drafting or developing. Joshua Zudu was drafted as a guard. That poor child has been forced into being a tackle for the last 2 years. He's one of the reasons why Daniel Jones tore his ACL last year, because it's not his fault. He's not a good tackle. They're forcing him to be something that he's not. And it so very obviously does not work. And it has not worked for 2 years. So what do the Giants do in week 18? Week 18, they put in Joshua Zudu at guard. And I was looking as I was watching it, and I'm sure whoever was on the live stream, you guys were like confirming this for me, because I'm looking at it and I'm like, is that Joshua Zudu? I think that's Joshua Zudu. And he's at left guard. This is really happening. Joshua Zudu's at left guard. And guess what? He wasn't the worst offensive lineman on the field, which is a miracle in and of itself. So tell me why we made it until week 18. And this is not going to make anyone feel better about keeping Brian Daboll. So I'm sorry about that. But it's the personnel decisions that drive us all insane. And I understand, like, I'm with you guys. I wanted them fired. It's frustrating to me that they are coming back, but it is what it is. And the only thing that I can hold on to some sort of hope moving forward is that maybe Daboll has learned some of these lessons. Maybe that going 3-14 this season, he learned that he made some really stupid decisions, whether it's clock management, bad play calls, the whole quarterback situation, all sorts of things. But I just hope that the fact that I know it's week 18, but the fact that before the season was over, they finally moved Zudu from tackle back to guard gives me the slightest bit of hope that Evan Neal is next. And maybe, just maybe, we are going to fix some of the problems in 2025. I keep saying maybe because, like I said, my faith is wearing thin here with these guys. But, they did get the offensive line in better shape. Obviously, the quarterback situation is a nightmare. That from top to bottom was a mess. But the 2024 draft class was great. I think Brian Burns is going to be a very solid piece of the defense moving forward. So I am looking forward to seeing more of him. Cordell Flott actually had the best year that he's had since he's been a Giant. On the flip side of that, Tay Banks was his worst. I'm curious to see what happens with Shane Bowen. There's little inklings going on that he might get fired. So if that happens, another podcast episode will be coming out, and we can talk about that and who we want for defensive coordinator. I personally think that Daboll is going to keep Shane Bowen unless Bowen gets hired elsewhere, because it's a really bad look for him and the organization on the fact that they are keeping a head coach who now in his 4th year has to get a 3rd defensive coordinator. Not a good look for anyone, especially Daboll, but also for the organization. So if Vrabel gets hired by the Pats, which I think is extremely likely, I wonder if he will take Bowen with him, which I think we all would bow down to Mike Vrabel if he did that, because I think we all collectively want a new defensive coordinator. TBD on that. From the offensive coordinator perspective, I'm fine with Mike Kafka continuing to be the offensive coordinator, but Brian Daboll needs to give up the play calling, okay? And it's not because I think he's a horrific play caller. I don't think either of them are that bad of play callers. I think Daboll is not a good enough head coach to handle play calling along with everything else. He was already struggling as a head coach last year before he took on play calling. And I just think it made things worse for him this year. So I'm begging him to not do that in 2025. Give it to someone else, whether it's Kafka, who remains as the offensive coordinator, or someone else that they bring in. You got to give up the play calling, dude. We can run your offense. You can run it how you want to run it, but you cannot call the plays. It's too much. I don't care that it's year 4. You've proven to us you're not capable of doing it all. And that's fine. That's what we have an offensive coordinator for. Okay. Let him do it. Speaking of Kafka, he was asked to interview for the Bears offensive coordinator role, not head coach, which I think is interesting, considering he is the offensive coach of the Giants. So assistant head coach is what I meant if I didn't say that. But so anyway, I am curious to see. I think Kafka is not going to get fired. He has 1 more year on his contract. I think he will only leave if he gets a head coaching or offensive coordinator. Honestly, any type of job. He might be like, I've got 1.5 feet out the door. I literally don't care. Whatever job offer I get, I'm getting the hell out of New York, which would not surprise me in the least bit. So again, TBD on that. I think they're still working out some of the decisions. And when we talk about what John Mara said, we'll see what happens with that. But I think on the offense, we are in decent shape. The offensive line is coming together. We've got a good running back class. Devin Singletary is here for another 2 years. We've got Tyrone Tracy, who obviously proved to be good. Eric Ray, who's okay. Turbo Miller, who is pretty good. Again, we didn't see a lot of either of those 2 guys, but I think that they can be part of the rotation moving forward. Wide receiver, I think Darius Slayton is going to go, but I do think that they will either draft or try to bring in a wide receiver in free agency. So we'll see what happens there. But you've got Neighbors and Wandale, who are good building blocks. Maybe if we see more of Jalen Hyatt, he will be better. I don't know what the deal is there, but they traded up to get him, and he's supposed to be part of the guy of the future. I don't know how much Darius Slayton plays a part in that, but I honestly think that if I'm Darius Slayton, I'm like, listen, I'm out, guys. It's nothing personal. I want to go to a team that wants to win. And my production completely fell off since Daniel Jones left. And, the other quarterbacks were even worse than him. So let me go to a team where I might actually get the ball on a regular basis from a quarterback who actually knows where to throw the ball. So we'll see how that goes. What else on offense? Oh, the tight ends. We're in a good position with tight ends too. I don't think that what's his name? Chris Manhertz. I'm not so sure that he will be back. I'm sure they will bring in guys during camp. Maybe they draft someone in later rounds, but I think between Theo and Daniel Bellinger, we've got 2 good building blocks for tight ends. So I feel like the offense, when we get a quarterback, I feel like the offense is in decent shape. It's not perfect, but I think it's in better shape than the defense is. So for the defense, we've got Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, Tyler Nubin, and Drew Phillips, who are the exciting pieces of the future. And the second layer of that, I think I would put Kayvon, Banks maybe, and Flott, because at least Flott is improving. The more reps he got this year, the better he looked. And I think Kayvon is a good football player. I think he was absolutely not worth the 5th overall pick at all. But I think if they bring back Aziz or they can get Abdul Carter, they could be in good shape from the edge perspective. So again, building blocks there. The good news is this draft is a really heavy defensive tackle class. So we are going to be in good shape to get a new blood who's going to help out Dexter Lawrence on defensive tackle. And then, I would really like them in free agency to bring in a veteran cornerback. I don't know who's going to be available at this point. In a couple of weeks, we will know and we can go through all the names. But I really would like to see them do that in free agency. And we did get to see a little bit of Tyree Phillips, who I so desperately want the Giants to bring back as a swing tackle. We got to see a little bit of him yesterday. He was okay first game back. But if he can build off of that, I would like to see him as a swing tackle. And then from the safety perspective, again, I think having a veteran there is really important. The whole defensive back group is very young. And I think they desperately need a good veteran leader who is not Adoree Jackson. Literally launch him immediately out of this building. Do not bring him anywhere near this building again. I am done with Adoree Jackson. I'm over him. It's enough. So bring in a good veteran who is a good leader and who can help develop some of these young guys. Now, speaking of that, it all starts with Brian Daboll. when it comes to improving the players. And player development is a huge problem for this New York Giants team. And while I believe that obviously it starts from the top down, I think we need some new blood when it comes to position coaches. Carmen Priscillo can stay. I think he did a really nice job with the offensive line. I think, Shea Tierney is not a bad quarterbacks coach. I think you can keep a couple of them here and there. The tight ends coach has been fine. I have a problem with the wide receivers coach, the running backs coach, and like literally everyone on the defense, because the fact that so many players are regressed, wide receivers dropping balls left and right, the running backs have a turnover problem, the defensive backs cannot ever get an interception. I don't give a shit that they got 2 against the Colts. When you have 5 interceptions on the whole season, you suck. End of discussion, okay? We need people who can catch, at least try and make a play on the ball. I mean, they had 9 pass deflections in one game and not a single interception. It's just unacceptable. So we need help with that. We need a good linebackers coach who is going to help these players stop the run, which I forgot about Bobby Okereke and Micah McFadden. So, we've got a couple other good pieces there. So yes, there are a lot of holes to fill. I don't think this roster is the worst one in the league. I think that we have not gotten the most potential and best play out of a lot of these players. And ultimately that's on the coaches. So again, we're going to see what happens with the coordinators here, but I really would like to see some change with the position player or the position coaches as well, because I think that they are also contributing to the problem. And I really need Daboll. He has to look in the mirror and learn that he needs to coach his players. And Carl Banks, I don't know what you need to do. If you need to lock Brian Daboll in a room and have a megaphone and just scream at him until he repeats verbatim, word for word, what you have said, that you have to coach your players and you cannot be afraid to discipline them and be hard on them. Daboll literally said, and we saw this with the way that he was with the quarterbacks, he's extremely hard on the quarterbacks. He's like literally talk shit about Drew Lock and the interceptions and the turnovers to the media. And he also talks shit about Daniel Jones to the media. Why is he so hard on them and no one else? You need to be hard on every single player in that building, because newsflash, they have all made a shitload of mistakes. I do not care who it was. Every single one of them has made a shitload of mistakes. And that includes Malik Neighbors and maybe not Dexter Lawrence, but it includes him and Andrew Thomas and some of the other best players on this team. So the coaches need some help immediately. Let's move on to John Mara, because this whole offseason is going to be all about we'll talk about the coaching changes that they make. Obviously, we're going to talk about our wish lists for players in the draft and free agency and all of the guys that they signed to future contracts and all sorts of stuff. So that is coming as the days move forward. But John Mara spoke to the media today, and this is everything you need to know about it. Okay. I took notes. It was a 10-minute presser, and I want you guys to hear all of the quote for quote things that he said if you don't feel like listening to it. This I found one of the most interesting things. He met with Joe and Daboll on Friday for several hours, and then he spoke to Steve Tisch. Oh my God, I can speak, I promise. The reason why I think this is very interesting is because there was a report from Jordan Schultz that came out last night, Sunday evening, that said John Mara and Steve Tisch are not rushing to any decisions. They are going to take their time deciding what they're going to do. And it's possible that they might not even make a decision on Monday. It might go into Tuesday. So this is what I do. I make sure I don't have any workouts scheduled so I can be ready to go as soon as the news alerts. And then I set my alarm for a little bit later this morning, because I'm like, they're not going to make any decisions that early. And boom, 8:45, decision is made. We're keeping both. So if anyone's like, well, how does that make any sense compared to the Jordan Schultz report? It's because they met on Friday. And they likely made their decision on Friday and said, we can't let week 18 determine whether or not we're going to keep or fire these guys. So whoever gave that to Jordan Schultz, wrong. Thanks for that. I would have set my alarm for earlier if I knew it was coming. So Mara also said that Daboll was coach of the year in 2022. He didn't disappear all of a sudden, and Mara still believes in him. He said in regards to Schoen, he had an outstanding draft in 2024, a good free agency period, and he likes the staff that he put together and built. So something that John Mara talks about, and we'll get to this, is the process and what Joe Schoen did for the organization. And I think that's important because I think some people maybe forget that we were living in the Stone Age when Dave Gettleman was the GM. So Joe Schoen had a lot of work to do. And, you can make the argument that you don't care and that's not important. But I believe that it is important. How important it is to the future is one thing, but I believe that it's very important because he literally had to take the organization out of the Stone Age and bring them into the present. And that requires a lot of work. There was a lot of turnover. He fired guys. He brought in new scouts. Like, there's a lot that comes into the GM and what the GM does and what his job is. Now, remember, Dave Gettleman also did a shitty job with the salary cap. Joe Schoen brought us out of salary cap hell. I am not defending Joe Schoen. I am giving you reasons as to why John Mara said we're going to keep them. These are some of the reasons. So if you're like, I don't give a shit what John Mara said, that's fine. I'm telling you, these are the things that were on his pros and cons list when he was going through whether or not to keep him. And, again, he talks a lot about the process, that what Joe Schoen has done was extremely helpful. Mara also said he understands this isn't a popular decision with the fan base, but he believes it's the right one and thinks that they can lead the Giants going forward. And what I have to say to that is that if this is what John Mara so firmly believes, which it sounds like he is, then good for you. Good for you for not giving into peer pressure. We're going to find out in a year or so whether or not it was the right move. Ultimately, we can't do anything about it, and we can bitch and moan and boycott all we want, which I'm sure a lot of fans will do. But, he stuck to his guns, and I'm glad that he's not caving under pressure, because he's done that in the past and it also didn't work. I'm not saying it wouldn't have worked this time. I'm just saying we also have done it in the past and it didn't work. So he was asked, what is your message to fans who are frustrated? He said, no one is more frustrated than me. I appreciate the fact that they are frustrated, but he feels the pain, but ultimately believes it's the right choice. Now, someone said to him, how do you justify this when your team went from 9-7-1 to 6-11 and 3-14? It's obviously not the record, proving that this is a good football team. And these are good people to have in the building. He said the results are not even close to what we want them to be, but they have to be better in year 4. John always says he wants to see progress. The signs were not based on record, but Joe is productive in the draft and free agency, including Burns. The staff and process is better. He also said that he also mentioned the relationship between Daboll and Schoen and said they still have a very good working relationship. They work together very well, which we all know was not the case with Judge and Gettleman. So I think that's why he pointed that out specifically. In regards to Daboll, John said he goes to team practices, sits in on meetings, which I thought was interesting, sees how the players react to him, and based on all of that, he thinks he's the right guy. So I know we are not privy to what goes on in meetings and stuff, but when we talk about losing the locker room and things like that, I think there was some concern and maybe unsettling temporary issues with the locker room. But the fact that they played really hard in the Colts game, I mean, you can say whatever you want about how they played against the Eagles. I think they tried. I think they're just not good, ultimately. But he did not lose the locker room. I do think that the players like him, and I think that the players respect him. I think we would all have more respect for him if he was a hard ass on all of the players, not Joe Judge hard ass, but unacceptable that Malik Neighbors has 5 illegal shifts. Like, I don't know how many times I need to talk about that, but the fact that it doesn't seem to be a problem is a problem. Mara was asked about a 2-year commitment because of Mara's previous comments on Jones, where he said, we basically did everything we could to screw him up. And when we finally helped him out a little bit, he had one good year in 2022. He said he won't put a time frame on it, but a year from now, if they're this bad, he will take the heat and he will be frustrated about it. So I think it's too soon to say whether or not they have a year or two. I think if they get a rookie quarterback, it will buy them 2 years. I think if they get a free agent quarterback, the expectation is they have to win now, which is scary, but I think that's what it is. John also said that the quarterback is the number one issue going into this offseason. He will leave it up to Daboll and Schoen to decide whether or not it's through free agency or the draft. Let's be clear, they are getting one in both because, again, there are no quarterbacks on this roster. And don't you dare comment Tommy DeVito. He is a practice squad quarterback at best, maybe the third string. Drew Lock is not coming back, and neither is Tim Boyle. So they're going to get a veteran free agent quarterback, and they're going to get a rookie quarterback in the draft. Mara said the team stunk this year for a lot of reasons, and he's already discussed them with Joe and Dabes, but he liked their plan and what he heard from them. So basically, when he sat down with them on Friday, he said, give me your plan. What are you going to do to turn this team around? What are the goals here? What's the future? The whole thing. They laid out all their plans individually, and him and Steve Tisch conversed and said, okay, we buy in. He said he didn't want to fall into the cycle again of taking one step forward, two step back by, firing only one of them, getting the quarterback, then firing this person, and then it's a whole mess again. He wanted to give them the chance to build it the right way. He can't justify the progress by the record, but more so by their plans to move forward, how they work together, etc. He wanted to take a calm and rational look at things, hear from them both, converse with Steve Tisch before making a decision. And I think that he was kind of insinuating that in the past he's been a little irrational and fired up and made decisions out of what he was feeling in the moment instead of the long term. And he didn't want to do that again this time around. This I thought was very interesting. And I was like, oh my God, does John Mara actually know maybe a little bit more about football than we've given him credit for? Which maybe not. I think anyone who's watched Giants football this year would also say the same thing, but you let me know. Mara asked Daboll if it was in his best interest to continue to call the plays. He said he wouldn't demand him to do one way or the other. It will continue to be a discussion this offseason, but ultimately, he will leave it up to Daboll to call the plays and to make changes on the staff. So that's why I also said TBD on whether or not staff changes are coming. Because if you're Brian Daboll and you have any sense of a brain, you cannot say I'm bringing everyone back after we went 3-14. Yes, it starts with you, Brian Daboll, but it also starts with the hiring that you've done. So do not fuck it up again, please. The point that I was going to say about that was, I think we all agree that we don't really want Daboll calling the plays. It's just he can't handle doing everything, which is fine. You don't have to do everything. But I think, in my opinion, this might be the only instance where I want John Mara meddling and say to him, do not call the plays. It's not because I don't have faith in you. I just think it's a lot for one person to handle. You are a young head coach. You have a lot of pressure on you. You're going to have to develop a quarterback. That's going to be more important than you calling the plays. I think I personally want him to meddle in that. What do you guys think? I don't know. You tell me. But that's what I'm feeling right now. And I know none of us want Mara meddling with anything, but I think this is the one instance where it could work in all of our favor. And then he can moonwalk out of the room and stay out of it. Please. He was asked about the young quarterback play calling and some of the other issues because he said there were a lot of issues as to why this team is 3-13. He said he didn't like how the defense played. They did not play well at all. The offense being bad obviously didn't help, but it put so much pressure on the defense. And he's tired. This is a direct quote. Tired of watching other teams go up and down the field. Listen, I love you, John Mara, for that. That is how you do things right. This is what I want Daboll to do. This is the shit. Sometimes you have to call people out. You got to do what Tom Coughlin and Bill Parcells did. And sometimes you got to say, listen, you can stay here, right? It's like a performance review. You can keep your job, but you better turn things around because newsflash, you did a shit job this year. I love him for that. God bless. Keep going, John. Go off. Someone was also asked about the roster. Does he think it's better now than it was 3 years ago? He said he's not confident that the roster is all that better now, obviously, considering they went 3-13, but the 2024 draft was a huge step. He said it's not often that all 6 players in a draft contribute as much as they did and play as well as they did. And that they also had a good free agency, and those two things will help them moving forward. He thinks fixing the quarterback position will help a lot. They need to win more games to prove that the roster was better. He also said it better not take that long because he's just about run out of patience. And then he smiled and said, you can soundbite that one. So I think he was kind of making a joke, but he was also like, you've got 1 year to fix it. Because if you have another losing record next year, sayonara, honey, you're both done. He said money is not a factor at all in coaching decisions, which the fact that someone even asked this was mind-boggling to me because they paid Joe Judge for an extra 3 years after the guy was fired and went to another job. And the same thing with Pat Shurmur and McAdoo. So I don't know why anyone would think that money was a concern when they literally were paying multiple head coaches at the same time. If I had thought we were so someone also asked him, you guys had the number 1 pick right before the Colts game, and then the team played really well. And then it kind of looked like you were tanking against the Eagles in week 18. And he said, if I thought we were tanking, I would have fired everyone. We do not tank. That is unacceptable behavior that would never fly in this building. You heard it from John Mara first. Oh, someone also asked him about the planes, which I thought was great. He said he didn't need the planes to tell him how upset the fans are. He hears from us every single day, and he tries to respond to as many as he can. He also said that he approved the DJ contract based on 2022, and they had all agreed to it. He's not holding that against them when they talk about, fixing the quarterback situation and things like that. But that was it. That's all from John Mara. I think we got some good key pieces out of that. And listen, that is where we're at right now. We're going to see how things continue to change. I will record another episode if there are any defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, if there are any other coaching changes. I'll do another episode. We could talk all about it. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe to this channel because tomorrow I am having on a scout, and you guys do not want to miss this episode. I have about 100 questions for him. We're going to talk about all the positions coming out of the draft, the quarterback situation. Are they worth taking number 1, 2, or 3 overall? Would he take Hunter over Abdul Carter? Is Mason Graham really the best defensive tackle coming out? Should they go for Milroe if they can't get one of the guys in the top 2? Is Jackson Dart the guy? What do they think about, some of the other quarterbacks? Kyle McCord from Syracuse. You guys are going to love it. I'm so excited to record it. It's going to be amazing. So subscribe. It's coming out Tuesday, tomorrow. Cannot wait. Please like and share with your friends. You guys, it's very sad to say this, but this off season is going to be a hell of a lot more fun than the regular season ever was. So we are going to have a really great off season, and we're going to have a great time. And I know people are not loving where we're at right now, but I do think it's going to get better, especially with a good free agency and draft. I think we can right the ship. We're going to try. So in the meantime, I'll be back tomorrow. Thank you guys for listening, and make sure you follow me on Instagram too at New York Giants Fangirl. Enjoy the rest of your day. See you tomorrow.